Oops. Oop. Sorry guys, not time for that yet. Hey, what's up you guys? It's Bloody Jacob here to bring you a review. Yeah, how do you guys like that intro, by the way? It's a little something I was thinking about doing earlier, but wasn't so sure. Anyway, it's Bloody Jacob here to bring you a review on the final movie of the Ginger Snaps trilogy. And if you guys have been following my channel, you'll know I have recently reviewed Ginger Snaps, the original. I also reviewed Ginger Snaps 2 Unleashed fairly recently, and right now I'm here bringing a review on the third and final entry in the series, which was actually a prequel, which of course takes place before the first two, called Ginger Snaps Back, the Beginning. Okay, now you guys know I consider the first Ginger Snaps a classic horror movie. I'd still consider it my favorite horror movie of all time. And again, I'm saying horror, I'm not saying horror. But yeah, I'd consider Ginger Snaps my favorite horror movie of all time. And you know, I don't like the second one quite as much, but I'd still say it's like a worthy sequel to the original. You know, it's a lot better than most other sequels to, you know, a lot of horror movies. You know, like Nightmare on Elm Street, etc. Anyway, yeah, and then this one, like I'd often thought about this, whether I actually like the prequel more than the original, and I've thought about this a lot. I've watched them both quite a few times at this point, and I'd still say I consider the first one my favorite. Like, it's just the original, it's the best, it's the one who started it all, you know what I mean? And, you know, I could do a whole video comparing the two, or just talking about the entire trilogy, and, you know, why this and why that, and why is it my favorite, why isn't it? I could do a whole video talking about that, but I'm not really going to right now. But I will briefly say that I do put the prequel Ginger Snaps Back, the Beginning, above the second one, which was Ginger Snaps 2 Unleashed. And I'd put the prequel Ginger Snaps Back, the Beginning, almost at the same level as the first original one, but not quite. So first, Ginger Snaps, the original, classic. And then my second favorite in the series would be the prequel Ginger Snaps Back, the Beginning. And then my third favorite would probably be, you know, Ginger Snaps 2 Unleashed, of course. And not to say that Ginger Snaps 2 is bad, of course. Like I told you before, I consider it a worthy sequel. It's not quite as enjoyable personally to me as the other two are. But right now we're here to specifically talk about the prequel, Ginger Snaps Back, the Beginning, as I've said about 100 times by now. So yeah, now some people get confused by this because it's supposed to take place, I believe, in the 18th century. I could be wrong about that, but you know, quite a long time ago. And you know, some people say, since the two main female characters in this movie are both called Ginger and Bridget, you know, like the previous two movies, they think, oh, are they dumb enough to say they're the same people as in the other two movies, or are they their ancestors? And we've never really made it completely clear about that. It's never been completely 100% clear. But obviously, I think if you have some common sense, you'd think that, you know, if anything, they're probably within the bloodline, as they talk about a lot in the movie. And, you know, as they talk about a lot in the movie, you know, what happens in this movie decides the fate of generations to come. And thus, that's why I think they have some kind of ancestral connection to the Ginger and Bridget we know from the original first two movies. So yeah, or at least they're within like the same neighborhood just a long time ago. So that's how I think of it. And before I get too deep into the story, I do want to read a couple quotes to you guys from the movie, because this has some pretty impressive writing parts of it. Like, we open up with a narration from Bridget, and here's what she says. The Indians say the curse began in the time of the ancients, and was passed down through the blood of generations. There are legends of the Wendigo, and the coming of the red and the black. legends of the day of reckoning, when death would consume the land and good would face evil, of the day the curse would be broken forever or grow stronger, and live on to plague generations to come. But ours was a story of survival, of two sisters bound by blood, a bond that would not be broken. That was our promise, above all, above men, above God, above fate. It was in our blood, together forever. I just think that's a really, I just really love how they wrote that. You know, it gives you a sense that the bloodline has ran rich and deep throughout the history, you know, and it's been passed down. It just really gives you like a deeper sense of like really where all the movies are coming from. You know, it just makes it it just makes it feel like all the movies are that much more important to the world, you know what I mean? It's kind of hard to explain, but I just really like the writing to that. And of course we find out in the movie that when she says the coming of the red and the black, the red being Ginger and the black being Bridget, of course. You know, and like I told you, like I mentioned before, this is where the bloodline is decided, you know, whether it's gonna go on and plague generations to come or, you know, be destroyed forever. So yeah, I like how it gives itself a deeper meaning. It's kind of cool. You know, of course, we have Catherine Isabel returning as Ginger, with Emily Perkins returning as Bridget. And with this one, Emily Perkins sort of takes a back seat to Catherine Isabel on this one, I think. You know, because she had sort of like her huge run in the second one, Unleashed. So, you know, with that Catherine Isabel getting a bigger role again, you know, she kind of took a back seat to her. Which, you know, I like Emily Perkins. I think she did pretty well in all the movies, actually. You know, she did pretty well mostly on her own in the second one as well, Unleashed. But really, I'm not going to complain about Catherine Isabel having a bigger role in this one because, you know, you guys know how much I adore Catherine Isabel. She's my favorite actress out of horror, out of any kind of movie, really. Any kind of TV show, Catherine Isabel is the best to me. So yeah, I'm not really going to complain about her getting a bigger role than Perkins in this movie, but, you know, Perkins still gets a fair share of good moments in this movie. Now, I'm not going to try to run this video for too long. I don't want to make it into like a 44-minute video like the first review I did for the series. I'm not going to try to make it quite as long as my second review for the series, but we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to try to run through every point in the story here, but I'm going to tell you about crucial points to it. So we'll see how long that takes me. This story came off as a lot more simplistic than the other two. Because with the first one, one of the things I loved about the first one was that, you know, it focused a lot on the bond between the two sisters and, you know, their connection to each other. And that was explored for, you know, a decent amount of time before Ginger was even bitten. So, you know, it had that going for it. And even in the second one, without Ginger having as much of a role, you could say, you know, it was still like haunting Bridget what had happened in the first movie. And we still got a huge sense of, you know, it's still like the main focus of it all, you know, just that connection they had with each other. And that isn't as much of a factor in this movie, I want to say. It's still there, you know, they still get to say their famous lines together forever. And yeah, it really comes through in the end, which I'll get to eventually. But yeah, I just don't think they focus quite as much on the relationship of the sisters in this movie, which I sort of miss. It's sort of like a con to this one, but it's not too big of a problem because you still, by this point we know, yeah, it's Ginger and Bridget. We know how close they are to each other. You don't really need to have it explained quite as much. So yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's still something I sort of miss being focused on a little bit more in the first two movies to this one, which didn't have it quite as much, but like I said, not too big of a problem, but still something I liked a little bit more in the first two entries in the series, if that makes any sense. Hopefully I'm making a little bit of sense here, making a connection, possibly. But yeah, so there's that. And yeah, a lot of this movie focuses on an old fort called the Northern Legion Trading Company. And yeah, it tells a lot about how like they would bring preservations or like different food and supplies to the fort, and they go back and forth and trade with the Indians and different things like that. Then in the narration it talks about how eventually when they were supposed to bring the food and supplies back, that group never made it back. And that's when the werewolf things started happening around that area. And I kind of think of it as like it's supposed to be the same neighborhood as the first movie, especially. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see how the bloodline really started and stuff, like I talked about before. So it really focuses a lot on the trading company fort. It's like where the main setting of the movie is. And yeah, I really like the set in this movie. That's another really cool thing about it. They really do a good job of making you think it's from an older time period, different ways and things like that. I like the snow effects in the movie. I like the woods area, the forest area, and stuff like that. It's all pretty cool to look at, I think. Yeah, it's something else I appreciate about all three of these movies is the practical effects. No CGI crap in this thing. No CGI crap in any of the other two either. Just all practical, and yeah, it's something else that's really cool for you Walking Dead fans out there. If you like The Walking Dead, you'll know who Greg Nicotero is. He's the special effects makeup guy for that show. And he actually worked on the werewolf effects and the animatronics in this movie, which I thought was really cool to find out. I knew that quite a while ago from watching some behind-the-scenes stuff for this movie. But yeah, that's just pretty cool. And I will say that the werewolf design and the effects in this movie are a tad bit above the other two in the series. So yeah, Greg Nicotero definitely did a solid job in this one. These movies don't really have like the greatest werewolf designs I've seen in my life, but I do think they probably get better and better as they go. And they've always been solid, like with the effects and how real they actually look. I'm just a little iffy on the design at points, but overall I think the effects are really solid in these movies. And Greg Nicotero did, a above par job in this one, I believe. So yeah, there's that. And like I said, there's not as much to talk about within the plot in this movie. I apologize if I stutter, I do that from time to time. But yeah, there's not as much to talk about as far as the plot goes in this movie. But like I said, I do still want to touch on a couple things in it. And so we sort of see, Ginger and Bridget, they're wandering in the forest on their own, and they run into this Native American woman whose little village looks like it has been torn up and, just slaughtered by something. And of course, it's the werewolves, or the Wendigos, whatever you want to call them. But, and she basically warns them, very cryptically that, kill the boy, or one sister will kill the other. So, yeah, I think I was pretty dead on with that quote there. I wasn't even reading off of anything. That's going back to memory there. And, yeah, and you'll see what that means later in the movie. And, yeah, eventually Bridget gets caught, like, in a bear trap, and Ginger goes off back to the woman, but she had disappeared. And so then this Native American guy shows up, and, he escorts him to the, fort, which I told you about earlier, the Northern Legion Trading Company. And, we meet quite a few different characters there. We have, I have trouble remembering some of the guys' names at the fort, but we have the guy with the hair kind of like mine, I guess you could say. He's sort of like the asshole of the group, you could say. Looks like he's one of the main guys on defense or on watch there. We have a guy named Sheamus, not WWE, but then of course we have Brendan Fletcher appearing again in a Catherine Isabel movie, so it's cool to see him. He doesn't last too long in this one, but still cool seeing Brendan Fletcher. I always liked that guy. Um, then we meet the leader of the fort, Wallace, and yeah, I actually remember that guy's name. And we learn that he had lost his son and his wife to the monsters watching them out there, and in the forest, which of course are the werewolves. And like I told you before, the supplies and food haven't gotten to that fort in about 2 months. Because that group never came back, as I said in the beginning of the video. So they're all kind of, making the most out of the very little food and water they have. And, and there's also this preacher character, that wishes to venture out of the fort, sign the company would understand. But you'll find out that Wallace doesn't leave for another certain reason. You'll find out that later in the movie. You'll find out why later in the movie. So yeah, that preacher character is pretty, sort of like your stereotypical religious asshole, or jerk, you could say. Sorry if I offend anyone with my language there, but that's to say, this religious man isn't a very good man, we'll say that. And, he's very cryptic, and, with his tone and the things he says, it's sort of like more on the extreme end of religion, you could say. So there's him, and then there's another one, that has lost his brother. I think this guy's brother is part of the group that was supposed to bring back all the supplies, and eventually when there's an assault on the fort by a few werewolves, we find out that guy's brother was turned into one and killed eventually, of course. Because we see the tattoo on it, then they actually pull out the werewolf's eye, and it's a glass eye just like his brother's. So yeah, I feel bad for him for a little bit, but then he turns out not to be too big of a deal anyway as a character. But yeah, so there's that, and like I mentioned, that attack on the fort by those few werewolves. Within that, we also see Brendan Fletcher's character, of course, get killed. Finn, I think was his name. Not really, well, yeah, killed, because what they would do, there's this doctor, I think his name is Dr. Murphy. What they do to test to see if people are infected is they put leeches near the wounds they have, and I guess when it goes after their blood, if they're infected by a werewolf curse, then they'll like start swelling up and getting bigger, and they'll get a little bit of fur on them. It's kind of freaky to look at. And yeah, we see Brendan Fletcher's character Finn, he's sort of like killing all the leeches because he doesn't want to be exposed to the group that he's infected. The doctor catches him and forces Finn to put the leech on himself, and of course we see the thing swell up and get fur all over it, and yeah, so a doctor puts Finn down and shoots him in the head. So yeah, you get that, it's harsh, but... And that worries Ginger and Bridget even more, because when they were staying there overnight, Ginger had gotten up and, was wandering around the fort, how that kind of thing goes. And, she found this what she thought was a boy, and, it turned around and it was like all deformed and sort of like in the middle of a transformation into a werewolf. In these movies it's a little bit more of a progressive, slower type of transformation. And, she is bitten by the small boy wolf, I guess you could say. And we eventually find out with that, that small boy wolf was actually Wallace's son, who was supposedly killed along with his wife. And we find out that Wallace had actually been keeping the boy alive as he's been transforming into a werewolf, keeping him in a room and feeding him here and there. So yeah, there's that bit of a twist. But again, you sort of understand him not wanting to let go of his son, especially after his wife being dead as well. So you sort of get it. I actually kind of like the guy who played Wallace. Let me see if I can get his name real quick. Just give me a second, guys. I'm trying to find his name for you. I think his name is Tom McCamus, and he hasn't done... Yeah, he's done some couple of things recently. It looks like he's been on Orphan Black recently. Let's see, nothing I really watched before, but he has quite the filmography list on IMDb, so yeah, look up Tom McCamus, I guess. I thought he did pretty well as Wallace, the leader of the Four in this movie, dealing with keeping his son alive as a transforming werewolf, and lost his wife. I thought he acted pretty well. He is probably the best actor in the movie besides Catherine Isabelle and Emily Perkins. So yeah, he did all right. He did pretty good. And like the guy who played the preacher, Hugh Dillon, I think was his name. He was Reverend Gilbert. I guess not a preacher, but a priest. I mean. So yeah, okay, and like I said, so Ginger's bitten by the Wallace's son, and we eventually find out the words click in Ginger's head that the native woman had told her that they need to kill the boy or the curse will go on. We know about that. And so Ginger goes out looking for the boy around the fort. She's sneaking around. She looks kind of cool with the hood up and everything. She has the knife and things like that. So Catherine Isabelle can look pretty badass, I'll just say that. But yeah, and eventually the wolf boy is spotted by the watchers at the fort anyway, and he is shot and killed, and yeah, so unfortunately Ginger wasn't able to kill him herself, and the dread sort of sets in. They do a good job of showing that, the dread of, now there being no way to end the curse here, and yeah, so that pretty much sealed the deal for the bloodline for a little while longer there, unless of course Bridget kills her sister, which we'll talk about in a minute. And let's see, and the Native American who had escorted him to the fort, he sort of encourages Bridget that she's gonna have to kill her sister, telling her that he has seen her in his dreams, since before he had even met her, and he believes he will die defending her, and Bridget will have to kill her sister to stop the curse from plaguing generations to come, like you heard about earlier. So yeah, there's that. I'm just trying not to forget any important parts of the story. Yeah, so Ginger, another cool thing I still like about all these movies is how they progressively show the characters slowly transforming into a werewolf. With especially Ginger in part 1, and Bridget in the second one, Unleashed, and with this one as well, they progressively change the makeup on Ginger, and they give her the more white in her hair, and her eyes are changing color and things like that. So I always like how they do that with the makeup. It's pretty cool. So they show the transformations pretty well, and she's starting to smell blood even from a distance on all the people there and everything. So yeah, I really like how they progressively show how it changes the person as they get closer and closer to full transformation. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And let's see, eventually Wallace finds out that the girls are aware of his son being kept alive, even though he's transforming into a werewolf. And of course he had to kill his own son, which I told you about earlier. The son is shot down by Wallace actually himself, after his son had almost attacked him, so that's why he finally decided to put his son down. And eventually he just tells Bridger that she can stay, but she's gonna have to cast Ginger out and have her go on her own and become what she's gonna become, basically. And so yeah, with that, Bridget refuses to abandon her sister though, so they both sneak out of the fort. And eventually I told you about the guy, I think his name was James, the guy with my kind of hair, the jerk at the fort, the one who was watching the wall and things like that. Not Game of Thrones, but the wall they have built up and stuff like that. He had to run in with one of the younger Native American boys, not the one that escorted him to the fort, but one of the younger teenage ones that was being kept there. and he throwing him out into the woods by himself, and so when Bridget and Ginger are sneaking out of the fort and they get into the woods, they run into the younger Native American boy, and he tells them that he would lead them to the cave of the hunter, which of course is the Native American who had escorted him to the fort originally. And Ginger and Bridget believe that the only chance they have now with the boy wolf being killed is to talk to the Native American woman and see if she can perform some kind of ritual or something like that, you know what I mean? And so, they're wandering in the woods, but then you kind of sense that, the werewolves out there are, watching them and things like that. And, so, and Ginger's bloodlust is just building up and building up, and, we see she just can't hold back anymore, and she just completely slaughters and tears apart the younger Native American boy. And so with that, her and Bridget rush to the cave, of the seer, the old Native American woman, and the hunter, who had escorted them to the fort. And, and so they have Bridget take this special thing, and she's able to see herself killing Ginger. And, it's made apparent that that's what she has to do in order to stop the curse from spreading. And, Bridget still, you can tell she's already hesitant to kill her sister. And, we've seen how that went in the first movie, but we'll see how this one goes. And, and when Bridget sees herself killing her sister in the vision, she had passed out. And then when she comes back to, we find out that Ginger's bloodlust has reached, the height. And Ginger had actually killed the old Native American woman and, ran off. As the hunter tells Bridget. So, yeah. So yeah, it was pretty brutal and, sort of semi-sad seeing the Native American woman being slaughtered like that, despite her trying to help. But, of course, Ginger couldn't control herself, so, you can't really blame her, the person, too much. And, the hunter basically brings Bridget back to the fort, as a way to draw Ginger back there. Saying that Ginger will come for her eventually, and telling Bridget that she needs to put an end to her sister. And, eventually, once they get there, the hunter just turns Bridget over to the watchers there, and, we sort of see that it's more about just ending Ginger in any way possible. Even though when the preacher goes to kill Bridget, Hunter shoots an arrow through his hand and stops him. So I think the hunter is more about preventing Bridget from doing anything else other than killing her sister, which is why he had her tied up and gave her over to the watchers at the fort. But you could argue that the hunter is sort of had an arrogance to him as well. And of course, Ginger eventually does show up. She knows her sister. She has to go back for her. She just simply can't leave her out there. Leave her at the fort or anywhere else. So eventually Ginger does come to the fort. She comes in and knocks. It's really creepy. It has really good tone and atmosphere, you know what I mean? And, we see James open up the thing and let her in, and, another scene I wanted to talk about, we had seen James, the jerk watcher on the wall for the fort or whatever. He and Ginger had gotten into a bit of a scuffle before. They were going to duke it out, but Bridget had stopped it by pointing a gun at his head. And, so of course James hits Ginger a few more times, not aware that she's very close to being transformed into a werewolf. You can see her fangs coming out, underneath her hood and all that. So that's pretty cool. And, we see, the makeup again just has changed on Ginger a little bit. She looks more and more creepy. I really love how she looks as she progresses in this movie. And eventually, Ginger tells him she has a secret. And, this little guy, James lowers himself down, and then she, mumbles, "They're coming." And then she just slashes James across the throat, and, it kills him. And then she opens the doors to the fort, and, werewolves, start coming in, and, she leads them in. It is a really cool shot when she opened the doors to the fort, and, she you know, so her opens up her arms and the werewolves come in behind her, you know, and go into the fort with her. So that was a really, really badass moment from Ginger. I really enjoyed that moment. Some really well done acting scenes from Catherine Isabel herself as well. So yeah, and eventually you see all the guys at the fort being picked off one by one. Like that guy who had the brother from earlier, he gets picked off. You know, Seamus gets killed. Seamus was actually killed by the Wolf Boy. So yeah, but all the other guys get killed by the werewolves that Ginger brought in as well. And you know, we eventually see that Wallace, you know, okay, well, wait, before that, you know, the preacher's getting pretty intense and he's wanting to burn Bridget and stuff, and yeah, eventually Wallace just impales him with his sword and kills the preacher and sets him on fire. So yeah, and he says, "Forgive me, for I have sinned." So yeah, I thought it was pretty cool that Wallace was actually the one to kill the preacher in the end, you know, instead of it being like Ginger or Bridget even. I thought it was pretty cool that Wallace did it. But Wallace himself gets tackled by a werewolf, and you know, the hunter kills the wolf on top of him, but not before Wallace had been, you know, bitten and clawed up a little bit. Wallace survived, but of course with that, you know, he's going to transform himself eventually into a werewolf. But what Wallace actually does is he, you know, puts some gasoline all over the main house in the fort and stuff like that, and he sits down in a chair and lights the place on fire, and then he shoots himself in the head. So yeah, I sort of get that. He sort of figured it really couldn't have gone any other way for him, especially after being, you know, infected by a werewolf. So yeah, there's that. And the hunter himself, he kills quite a few of the werewolves entering the fort. But, you know, of course, Ginger's somewhere out there, you know, stalking in the shadows, skulking in the shadows is what I meant to say. You know, Hunter kills quite a few of the werewolves, but, you know, he gets bitten himself on the arm. And, you know, Wallace had actually untied Bridget, you know, so she's up, you know, before Wallace had actually killed himself and stuff like that. So, you know, Hunter tells Bridget one last time that, you know, she has to kill her sister, and, you know, it needs to be done. And so, yeah, we see Ginger eventually walking through the fort, and, you know, again, the makeup on Ginger just looks so awesome here. I loved it. And, you know, Ginger eventually walks up to Bridget, and, you know, Hunter's waiting for Bridget to stab Ginger with a knife. And, you know, Ginger's just waiting to see what's going to happen. And instead, Bridget, you know, says to Ginger, "Together forever," and she turns around and stabs the hunter instead with his own knife. So yeah, Bridget kills the hunter and chooses her sister above everything else, above man, above God, above everything. And even though what Ginger's becoming is, you know, monstrous, she still chooses to be with her sister. So yeah, it was a really great. One of the first time I seen it, I didn't expect it to go that way. You know, I just sort of thought we would have to see Bridget killing this version of Ginger again, just like in the first one. But now we got to see a different twist on the ending here, with, you know, Bridget actually choosing to kill the hunter instead, and she runs off with Ginger into the woods, and so yeah, it was really cool. And yeah, eventually we see, you know, the fort burning to the ground after what Wallace did and stuff like that. And then we see, yeah, like another thing throughout the movie, Bridget would say to Ginger that she's cold, you know, and Ginger would say, "Me too." But this time, you know, we see the fort burning down, and then we see Ginger cradling Bridget, you know, a distance away from that, and, you know, Bridget is muttering that she's cold, and then, you know, Ginger almost, you know, further along, transformed into a werewolf, she just says, "I'm not." And again, I know I said this repeatedly, but I just love the makeup on Ginger here. And, you know, she says that she's not cold, you know, she says, "I'm not." So yeah, it's really cryptic and brooding, but just a really, really nice chemistry these actresses have together, you know, Catherine Isabel and Emily Perkins. So yeah, I think I ran through the main parts of the plot in the movie. Like I said, a lot more simplistic, not quite as much detail to it, but what really drove this movie for me with the story was, like, the whole bloodline, how they, like, enriched and, you know, deepened that whole curse and the whole thing about that. And obviously, the last quote from Bridget, sort of like continuing her narration from the beginning of the movie. Let's see. Sorry, just let me find the quote again, guys. Let's see. I'm sorry, I can't seem to find it. Okay, here we go. And these were the last lines. I think Bridget sort of continuing the narration from the beginning of the movie. She says, "A day of reckoning, the day the curse grew stronger in the red and the black, sisters united in blood, together forever." So yeah, this is, yeah. And you could argue, wait, if the curse continued, but it could have been stopped if Ginger had killed the boy, then you could argue, like, okay, but then in the first one, why couldn't Bridget get rid of the curse on herself when she killed Ginger? Well, that's because the curse grew stronger on this day in this prequel, when Bridget and the older versions of Bridget and Ginger had, mixed together, and, really truly continued the curse, and like they said, the curse grew stronger. So thus I think that they couldn't just end it by killing the other anymore, by the time we get to the sisters in the modern times in the first movie. So yeah, I think that's really how it makes sense. I think that adds up to me. I think it all, sort of writes itself into a pretty good, story here. So yeah, I think I hit on all the main parts of the plot. So overall, this video has gone on for longer than I had intended again, but I really enjoyed taking you guys through the story again, and I love these movies, my favorite horror movies of all time. And yeah, still Catherine Isabella's greatest role in my opinion was Ginger Fitzgerald in the Ginger Snaps trilogy, and Emily Perkins did great in this trilogy as well. My favorite trilogy of horror movies out of anything whatsoever. And Catherine Isabelle is just incredible actress, incredible series of horror movies here. So yeah, that's the final Ginger Snaps review you'll be seeing me do for a while, unless there comes a time when I want to do like a complete updated review on the movies, which probably won't happen for a while, if ever. But I may do videos in the future where I talk about the movies again, just not like a specific review or something. But yeah, it's been great watching these movies and reviewing them for you guys, so I really hope at least some of you enjoyed them. I know they're pretty long, but I don't know, I just really enjoy talking about them. They're my favorite movies of all time, guys. My favorite actress of all time, Catherine Isabelle, so I could really talk about most of her roles for hours. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. My next video you'll probably see is, my weekly Strain review, which will be out, by Monday morning, with the episode airing Sunday night, of course. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And the next movie review you'll be seeing from me is likely going to be American Mary, and you'll probably see that after my weekly Strain review Monday morning. So yeah, American Mary will follow that Strain review Monday morning, and it'll be released at some point in the next week, I believe. So yeah, first Strain review Monday morning, and then after that, going into the next week, you'll be seeing an American Mary movie review very, very soon. So yeah, I'll catch you guys for my Strain review, and sorry if I'm really repetitive with my wording, but hope you enjoyed it, and peace. See you soon.